Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Science of Reading program webinar series, Reading Comprehension in Action. My name is Trisha, and I'm on the literacy team here at Amplify. We're so excited that you're joining us here today for an educator panel to learn more about Amplify ELA, our middle school core literacy curriculum. Today's session is being recorded, and we'll share the recording link via email later this week, and you'll receive a certificate of attendance for joining us. If you'd like to access closed captioning, please click on the CC button in the bottom tray and then show captions. Before I go into a few housekeeping items, while I wait for some more people to join, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. We have panelists joining us from all over, and I'm joining from New York City. Okay, I still see people hopping in. For those just tuning in, we're saying hello in the chat and sharing where we're joining from. But I'll let you all pop answers into the chat and I'll get us started. So this is the last live webinar opportunity in this series, but the good news is that we have all the webinars listed on this slide available as recordings and ready for you to watch at your own convenience. You can access all those at amplify.com/fall2025-SOR-demos. This link is being added to the chat momentarily, so you can save it and access all of these webinars on demand. With that, I'll hand it over to the moderator of this panel, Laura Young, a former classroom teacher who now helps support Amplify as a senior literacy product specialist. If you have any questions for Laura or the panelists at any point during the webinar, feel free to leave them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll take a look at the end, time depending. Questions can sometimes be lost in the chat, so again, the Q&A box really is the best spot for them. And that's all for me. Laura, over to you.
You, Trisha. Every time I get to do a session like this, I'm reminded of why I fell in love with education in the first place. There's something so energizing about connecting with teachers who are doing the incredible work with Amplify ELA and seeing the impact that it's having on students. So today isn't just about curriculum features, it's about stories and successes that make us great educators and positively affect our students. And we do have some truly amazing panelists with us here today who embody exactly what I'm talking about. So would each of you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your experiences with Amplify, and we'll start with Jane and move across the screen.
Okay, hello, I'm Jane Majerac. I'm from Northgate School District, that's outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been teaching for over 20 years, and I first started with Amplify when I was teaching sixth grade, and I've used Amplify for the last 3 years in eighth grade.
Thank you, Jane. Brian?
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Ruth. This is my 11th year as the eighth grade language arts teacher at Eagle Point Middle School in Oregon. I think it's my fourth or fifth year with Amplify, and yeah, it's been a real game changer. It's helped me become the teacher that I've always felt I needed to be because it's given me the awesome resources that help make it happen.
Love that. And Brent?
Hi, I'm Brent Williamson. I've been teaching for about 15 years in the Indianapolis area in various places. I've used Amplify for about 4 years. I did 2 years of the CKLA in fifth grade before moving to sixth grade and starting to use Amplify. And I loved it from minute one when we were doing textbook adoptions, because of all the options. I was like, this is the only one I've ever actually wanted to use instead of just making my own stuff. I was like, these people really have a quality product.
Yeah, that speaks to me too, Brent. I felt the same way when I was in the classroom. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves. I can already see we have some amazing perspectives represented here today, and your experiences are exactly what the audience needs to hear, real stories from real classrooms. So let's jump in to the good stuff. I'm excited to hear what you've been discovering in your classrooms. Amplify ELA is a blended curriculum designed specifically for grades 6 through 8. With Amplify, students dive into a range of rich and diverse texts that build vocabulary and knowledge. And incorporating complex text is crucial because it enables students to really develop the skills and capacities they need to succeed. Certainly, the power of the science of reading doesn't end in elementary school. Evidence-based reading instruction is equally critical for developing strong, proficient readers in middle school and beyond. At this stage, we're really focusing on the upper strands of the reading rope, vocabulary, background, and syntax. They move to the forefront. Daniel Willingham says, whether or not readers understand a text depends far more on how much background knowledge and vocabulary they have relating to the topic than on how much they've practiced comprehension skills. To further emphasize that, um, let's talk about the baseball study. It was an experiment done with some 7th and 8th grade students that tested how reading comprehension is impacted by prior knowledge. They divided the students into 4 groups based on reading ability and knowledge of baseball. And as we would expect, the group with both high reading ability and high knowledge of baseball outperformed the other groups. The big surprise was that the group that performed almost as well was the group with low reading ability but high knowledge of baseball. So knowledge impacted performance far more than reading ability. So a curriculum grounded in research, such as Amplify ELA, will have topics that students spend a significant chunk of time on to develop that knowledge and build that vocabulary rather than jumping from topic to topic. With any ELA program grounded in science of reading, we know that students are expected to work with complex grade level texts, to become experts on multiple texts, and develop the ability to make the connections that transfer. And keeping text at the center, not trying to teach comprehension through skills and standards, is really how we produce proficient readers. So, Jane, I'm wondering, can you walk us through a specific unit and describe how knowledge accumulates across that unit for your students?
I'm glad to. Actually, you showed the unit I was thinking about. It's our Liberty and Equality unit. It's the second unit for Amplify, and it has unbelievable texts. It starts sort of with it's sequential historically, but it is also the depth of knowledge and the variety of sources is really unbelievable, and the students absolutely love it. The unit's centered around the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and we read almost the entire book. One of the great things about Amplify is that they have these incredible readers who you can play the audio for those kids. So it's accessible to kids at all reading levels. And the reading is very dramatic, but also just wonderful and really riveting as you're reading through it. They can follow along in paper, but they also can just, listen. And we go from things like John C. Calhoun's speech to the Senate in 1837, Frederick Douglass's response to it. And then they get other sides of the story in that they have the incidents in the life of a slave girl. We have a short excerpt of that, which is wonderful because, so much is centered around boys and things. And actually, the next part is the Boys' War, which is about young boys joining the Civil War. And they read part of the Declaration of Independence. And really, the kind of the two things about this unit that are really awesome is that the paper that they are writing is kind of comparing the Gettysburg Address with Frederick Douglass's views, and it's an incredible paper that they bring so much knowledge to because we've really delved deep into the Gettysburg Address and the narrative. But then the other thing that they have is one of the bonus units, and that is we go through the life of a slave and we use the National Archives, actually documents from the National Archives, and all provided by Amplify. So it's just an absolute incredible unit that has so much knowledge that accumulates across all of the resources that we're using.
Thanks, Jane. I really appreciate the multiple perspectives in that unit. And was that the Emancipation Project that you were? Yeah,
that's it. I couldn't get the words out, but that is a really neat project because we also, the kids don't even know about the archives, and it's a wonderful thing to expose them to.
Thanks. Brian, to build on that, what, if anything, really surprised you about student engagement when you shifted to this knowledge building curriculum?
Well, I actually teach that same unit. We just got done with that. We just started Frankenstein, which is super engaging. Oh, of course, right when I start talking, the bell goes off. Can you guys hear that?
That's the school day.
Yeah, exactly. But really, I want to talk about like within the classroom itself, just that dynamic totally shifted as soon as I started using Amplify. My first year with Amplify, there was a little bit of a delay on our tech side of things. So we had a few weeks before we had access. And so I did a whole nother unit, something I've been doing for years, and it works really well. And they're eighth graders, so they're going to be doing eighth grade things. And as soon as we jumped into Amplify, that same group of kids, and this was like a second year back from COVID, so they're still partially feral, and behaviors and referrals, all things are going kind of crazy. And I always have large class sizes, which is really hard to maintain. But as soon as I like seriously day one with Amplify, they were just so focused and so engaged. Honestly, they're just too busy to misbehave. And then it's just so engaging the material there. I want to add to what Jane said of the with the Frederick Douglass unit. They it's a difficult text. It's one, the topic is hard, and two, the language is very difficult. But Amplify does such a great job at like breaking down that language so that it makes sense to them and teaches them how to break it down and paraphrase it. So when we start comparing it to the Gettysburg Address, they're really analyzing the language, which is the skill that they could apply to anything, which then ties into when we get into Frankenstein, which is even tougher, even older language. They already have that foundation.
I love that the way that you tied in. They're doing hard work, and yet they're still engaged and they're still enjoying it. And that's something that I really see when I'm working with schools who are maybe considering Amplify. We go visit someone who's using it and seeing it in action. And the first thing I hear every time is, wow, there are no disruptions. There are no students asking to leave the room. There's like little off task behavior. And I think, yeah, you're right. It is engaging, but also, they're busy doing the work. Um, Great insight there. As we move on, Brent, what evidence do you see that students are actually then retaining and building on knowledge from previous units as they're doing this hard, engaging work?
It goes in kind of two different ways because there's the explicit way where you will see them remembering knowledge and information from previous units. Like we'll do the Roald Dahl unit at the start of the year, and then later in the year we get to the chocolate unit. And so then they're remembering all about Roald Dahl and how we tied in some Willy Wonka, and there was the chocolate factory and all that. And then they're like, oh, wait, so this is where the chocolate in the sweet shop would have come from? I was like, yeah, because there's some original source documents from like the early 1900s about chocolate plantations. And so they were making those explicit connections. But you also see it just in their general progress from unit to unit in their actual performance in ways that they might not specifically be conscious of. It's definitely building their ability to like dive into the text, look closely, and just really attend to the text and find that evidence for their answers. And then we're moving on to the fever unit, and we're studying doctors finding evidence of a disease spreading agent while the students are evaluating the evidence they are evaluating. And then that leads into the chocolate unit where not only they're looking for evidence to support their claim, now they're juggling multiple sides and evaluating that evidence. And you can really see that just build and grow organically, which is really what Amplify feels like a lot. It's very holistic and organic. Their writing it just keeps getting better, and they don't backslide. Like you see just that continuous improvement from unit to unit.
That is such a cool perspective because I was really talking, about the knowledge in the units, and you're adding the knowledge that they're gaining as learners and how they apply that. And I really love that, and I've seen that in my own classroom as well. Thank you for those answers. As we move on, when we are using that knowledge vocabulary, collaborative discussion is an important part, and Amplify lessons provide regular opportunities for students to practice and benefit from sharing their thoughts. Strong texts necessitate and support frequent collaborative discussions. Catherine So says, let your classrooms be noisier. And I love that. You walk around the classroom, but it's students doing work. They are being noisy, but they are talking about the things that they need to, with some clear goals in their discussion. So things like polls and using the text as referee, um, debate, and the way that Amplify sets students up to be able to understand the purposes and the components of a debate. Socratic seminars and fishbowl discussions help students develop those norms and processes for effective exchange of ideas. And we know middle school students are social, and so this just really adds to their impact in the classroom. So, Brent, how do you use Amplify ELA's discussion protocols to help students engage with these complex text and vocabularies, or which strategies really resonate most for you and your students?
What's really nice about it is how do I use the discussion protocols is I just follow what's there in the curriculum, and it works, and it's nice, and it's worth using, and it's very easily laid out. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are good quality discussion prompts built in. You want the kids to have quality discourse about the text. And frequently when we're in the classroom, it is about the text, but it's very one-sided. You're not necessarily getting the quality discourse. And you want it to kind of be more like a book club where you get the quality discourse, but maybe it's not always as text-based as you like. So you hit that nice balance of having really good discussion prompts, which comes down to great text selection and having texts worth discussing, texts that have something to say. And the way that it is scaffolded and the accommodations and just the build of it all really makes those discussions accessible to even my more struggling readers. Like once they comprehend the text, then they can start digging into it and have things to say about it. Strategies, they particularly love the fishbowl discussions where they get with partners and they prepare some things to say, and one sits in the inner circle to talk and the others sit in the outer circle to take notes. They love when we jot down like additional ideas and questions and give it to the outside people so that when discussion runs dry, they can feed the fish and like drop in a new idea for them to discuss. And they could do that all day.
Feed the fish. I love it. Um, and you bring up a good point that a lot of those techniques and strategies, they're already there, they're built in. And one of my favorite was use the text as a referee. And what I really like is that it's requiring the students to do the work. They're not waiting for me as the teacher to feed them the information. Very constructive. So, Brian, what changes have you observed on students' use of evidence and reasoning when they have deep knowledge of a topic? Like, are they able to engage more?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They are very good. Once I've started using Amplify, they are so good at answering those questions because they understand the topic really well, and therefore they're able to find why and find those pieces of evidence really well. That I have. That was one of the things I struggled with by eighth grade was them just choosing the right kind of evidence to help kind of answer the question that they're going for, and trying to talk about the topic in the way that they need to. It's no longer a challenge for them to identify that evidence because it's built in throughout the unit. Keeps spiraling back, like we're taking notes on everything, we're highlighting things, they have that stuff ready to go. So now I can focus more on how they use and implement that evidence, because they still struggle with, let's put in a whole paragraph and that's my evidence and then I say a couple of things, but now I can actually fine tune not just what they think but like how they express that thinking. It opened up to a little more advanced work in that way.
I love that. And it is such a process, I think, for students to be able to choose evidence that backs up what they're saying instead of just evidence that they like or found. And then as we move into like really discussing with that evidence, the knowledge, Jane, what changes have you observed with in general with their discussions when they have this rich content knowledge to draw upon?
I've really noticed the confidence has changed, that students have that confidence to speak because they're certainly more informed and they're grounded in that background knowledge. And often their questions of one another are better, their questions in class are better, and it just gives them the ability to speak out when generally sometimes, I didn't see that before I was using Amplify.
Yeah, thanks. I really like also the scaffolds that Amplify puts into place, those sentence frames and things that really support our students who may be struggling with academic language. And, I really think Amplify does a good job with that. As we move into talking about writing, we know it's important that reading and writing are integrated. It's more efficient, it's more effective. Students do much better. When they are writing about a text. If you think about reading as the input, writing as the output, it's really what's happening in between, where they're making meaning and developing their ideas, where the learning's taking place. And it is really a great way to bring in a lot of skills at once. And Amplify does a great job of, in addition to just regular writing assignments, doing activities where students are maybe fine-tuning their writing skills, working on if-then statements or practicing paraphrasing or summarizing, comparing and contrasting and clarifying their understanding in just activities that are connected with the close reading. And pulling out that evidence in addition to ample opportunity to bring all those skills together as they craft a written response to text. So writing is happening all the time in every lesson, even if it's not a constructed response type writing, it is taking place, definitely. So Brian, can you describe how writing about amplified text actually improves their reading comprehension?
Yeah, yes, I would love to. Writing was always my favorite part of anything that we were teaching, and anything that the kids were learning, and it was something I felt like very good at. But a lot of it was like, okay, let's pick a topic and let's start researching and do some writing. I just love how everything in Amplify builds off of everything else. So when they're reading and all the questions that come up, like you were saying, that they're not quite those constructed responses. They're working on practicing those different writing skills. And I try to tell them it's like those questions that you get throughout the lesson are kind of like the notes that you take if you are doing like Cornell notes or some other form of note taking. And then you get to use those later when you are getting to the actual like more of the bigger assignments. And I think the biggest thing that it helps do is really develop their writing stamina so they can write for longer periods of time, and they're able to get to document that critical thinking that they've been doing throughout the reading of it and answering all those other questions. So that way, when they write for their 10 minutes straight and they have their ideas basically all kind of mapped out, again, because everything builds off of everything else, that writing comes back later and they're able to develop those into bigger ideas as we get closer to the end of the unit.
Hmm. There's some really great points there. Jane, in your class, do you see that repeated exposure with the text strengthens their ability to cite and analyze evidence?
Absolutely. I mean, students are almost constantly citing and analyzing evidence in class, and in a very in some higher stakes ways, but often it's very low stakes. It's just a daily thing that we are citing evidence and then we are analyzing it. And that in itself has been an enormous help because the repeated practice of it, they know exactly what they're doing. So it makes, when it comes to TDAs and things like that, it's very, very natural. The daily expectation is the language of citation and explanation, and it becomes almost second nature to all levels of students. And I wanted to go back to what you said about the sentence stems. I love those that are provided, and I sometimes will like screenshot it and bring it around to even when kids are stumped or they are a little bit slower to get started. And that is so nice to have that provided for you and once they've seen them a few times, they kind of are able to anticipate it the next time they start to write.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that. I think you brought up a good point too, that uh, it's that the question was repeated exposure, and the fact that they're working with that text, that set of paragraphs multiple times and digging back in, it does really help them be able to pull that correct evidence, but also have that greater understanding, and really improve their skills. Brent, before I get to you, I want to just talk about my own experience using Amplify ELA. I saw writing improve like nothing I had used before in my over 20 years of teaching because of all of the resources that are there, collaborate and share and on the fly and the Spotlight app. But really, working, I can't say enough about the automated writing evaluation tool and its ability to provide that quick feedback, that turnaround. It was no longer a case where it took me 2 weeks to get all the writing graded and back to the students. And I think that's really what made the difference. For a middle schooler, 2 weeks is an eternity when I can say tomorrow, look at your writing that you did, yesterday, and let's work on it. Let's actually act on the feedback. I saw that really translate into some improved writers. So in your classroom, Brent, the feedback mechanisms, the structures, the cycle, how do you see that transform student writing?
It works really well. The continuous feedback mechanism is crucial. A mistake that I've often made is you do the work, you get the essay in, yeah, you get it graded. Maybe it took a week or two. You hand it back. You have all these notes and feedback on it, and it's like, great. Remember all those little notes and feedback I gave you for the next essay in like 3 weeks from now. And no one's going to do that. They might remember the grade they got, but not much else. In the Amplify program, especially the digital version, it is constantly bringing back writing they did from previous lessons and having them work on and add to and improve their writing, either with like new ideas from the text or new writing skills. And then for me, the way like the final unit essay works is the way it's distributed across the multiple days and all the prompts for assisting students and helping them is really focused on getting them that feedback during the writing process when they can use it right now, make the changes and cement in the new behavior. Because a note on one essay for 2 weeks later is not going to cement any sort of changed behaviors. So between the AWE getting you the ability to give it to them really quick, or again, that continuous bringing the writing back to look at it again and improvement, it's great. I see them first start to write more, then they start doing better on zooming in on one specific moment or claim. Then they're learning annotation, which forces them to start pulling evidence out, then really connecting it and developing it. So it really does work them through those phases. And now they can just go, like, even after the first couple of units, 4 or 5 paragraphs, they're not even blinking. Like, I have to cut them off on short answers on tests and be like, all right, you have a 300-word maximum. Like, don't go. And they're like, oh, that's not enough space to say all the things I need to say.
Yeah, that's fine. That makes me think of two things. One, when I was first using it in my classroom, and there is a number, like you need to write at least 120 words or whatever. And the first time I said that, it's like 120. And then within like 2 or 3 lessons, I'm hearing them and watching them go, I have 240. What do you have? And like they realize, oh, that's not that much, and I have things to say. But another thing I got from what you said, Brent, was we've been focusing a lot on how it's supporting the student, and that's really the goal, but it's also support for the teacher, to have those things in place, that we aren't, like you said, reinventing the wheel or creating something new, because it's there and it works. So it's really nice. Um, So, something I've been digging a lot into lately is the science of learning, that cognitive science, and how our brains operate and how we need to help our students really learn and retain that information. And, first step is it has to be engaging. And we've talked a lot about that. Second step is it has to move from short-term to long-term memory, but it doesn't stop there. We have to be able to like retrieve it back out of our long-term memory and add to it and put it back in there and pull that back out again and do more with it. And so, it's not just kind of a one and done thing, retrieve it, space it out, mix it up, do it over and over and again. So we think about seeing that in action. In Amplify ELA, there's a subunit on the telltale heart. Really short story, but we're teaching it over 6 lessons. And in 3 of those 6 lessons, the students are working on the standard to analyze how an author develops and contrast the points of view of different characters. So they're going to do that 3 times in just those 6 lessons. But let's take a look at how that standard is distributed over all of the units. And this is true for all the skills and standards. Amplify isn't looking for mastery at the first encounter or in a particular unit, but it's allowing students to benefit from those multiple encounters that are spaced over time to pull from that retrieval and cognitive load and shift. It's really a shift away from the way that I taught for many years, where maybe I spent a chunk of time on a skill or a standard to achieve mastery, and then we're done and we move on to something else. And so I really saw that my students, and you all have alluded to this, or it said outright, that you could see your students being able to carry things over and transfer and build on rather than like starting over and over again. So Brian, how has teaching with Amplify's ELA distributed approach to standards changed what you see in student performance compared to traditional unit by unit standards instruction?
I think this is the only way you should teach standards in ELA at all, because they are they're so cyclical just in themselves. Like even from kindergarten to 12th grade, it's the same kind of standard, just different degrees of it. And so I've always tried to do that even before Amplify. That's kind of like how I was learning, like spiral these ideas out, keep coming back to them. But you have your focuses in each unit, and it worked pretty well. But when Amplify came in, all that stuff's done for you. You don't have to, like Brent was saying, you don't have to rebuild that wheel every single time. And that spiraling and circling back to the standards, it was allowing students to apply those same skills over a variety of different situations, different texts. And so that what we alluded to earlier with the knowledge of the content helped them do well on those tests. Now they have knowledge of that skill and they can apply it to new content that they don't already know very well. It's like the Amplify really is like, it's like teaching on steroids. It just makes everything so much easier.
Oh, that's a quote that needs to go on our Facebook site. I love that. And then, Brent, what evidence do you see that this distributed practice of standards leads to better performance than just isolated skill instruction?
Our evidence is in our data. We have seen enormous growth since we started using this and doing this. And then digging into the science and the research, you really see that a lot of the isolated skill instruction, the word skill is a little misleading. It's actually an outcome, not a process. So when you talk about comparing 2 different characters' point of views, first graders can do that. That's not a new thing. You can read them the true story of the 3 little pigs where, oh, the wolf is the good guy. And you ask, hey, how does this wolf and this pig think differently? And they're like, great, yeah, they can do that. The difficulty is doing it in a more complex text. So a lot of times they just present the skill head on, just the outcome. After they comprehend the text, they can all discuss theme and compare and contrast. They're all capable of that. So it's kind of like taking a clay cup, saying, hey, look at this cup. It's round. It's got a handle. Here's what it looks like. Great. Here's some clay. Make one. And they don't know what to do because we haven't gone over the actual process of how to get there. And we say, well, no, here's the cup again. Look again. It's round. It's got a handle. Now make the cup. So we keep just presenting them with the outcome we want, which is make an inference. And that's not a conscious process. That's the automatic process that comes after the comprehension of the text. So when we dive into the Odyssey and we're looking at Polyphemus and Odysseus, and we're comparing their points of view, we're not saying, here's what it means to compare 2 different characters' point of view. We're saying, hey, look at how like Odysseus is fighting Polyphemus and he like stabs him in the eye with the mast. And the kids are like, oh, that's crazy. And then they want to dig into it. So when we attack the story and the text, they've got both the engagement and the comprehension, that then any of them can say, oh, well, yeah, here's how they think differently because I understood the story. So when we build that understanding, then they can do the skill pretty easily.
I love that. And perfect segue to comprehension, which also you just mentioned. It's an outcome. The entire series of webinars that we're ending here has been about reading comprehension in action. And if you followed the series or the Science of Reading podcast, you know that contrary to what I thought for a long time, comprehension isn't a skill, it's an outcome. And the bottom line is rather than teaching reading skills and strategies in isolation, middle school instruction should focus on building knowledge systematically, engaging with complex, worthwhile text, developing that vocabulary, practicing the retrieval and spacing for retention, integrating reading and writing and discussion, and using evidence-based practices that are going to create lasting learning and enable students to grapple with some more difficult text. So, Brian, were you surprised, or what surprised you most about student comprehension growth using a knowledge building approach as opposed to something else?
I was really surprised at how quickly they could grow in such a short time. The texts they're very complicated, but they're dissected through the lessons and the questions, all the different activities and the things that they do in such a way that it helps them like really have some early successes with things that are still actually pretty complicated, and it builds that confidence early on. So when they do start the struggle, they can come at it with that success, and it helps carry them through it. Like we're reading Frankenstein right now, and it's Grizz Grimley's Frankenstein. So it's like it's got those amazing pictures and illustrations, and so we can compare the language to how it's being illustrated, and they can really pull apart those pictures real well. And then the language is extremely complicated, but it helps them kind of comprehend it. So then when we get to those Socratic seminars and the debates that are coming up, they have a really strong knowledge built in that they're able to like really take it to that next level. It's back to Vygotsky's zone of proximal dissonance, really. The knowledge building approach keeps them just in the right amount of struggle like the whole time. Those light bulbs are is usually like, oh, by the end of a unit or end of like a really good lesson, like, oh, I got a lot of aha moments. But now it's like every single day there's kids who are like, oh, that's what that meant. Oh my gosh. And so it's really empowering.
I like that. Just the right amount of struggle. Feeding off what you said, Brian, I'm going to pose a new question to all of you. When I was teaching and teaching with Amplify, had to add a new classroom job, which was the classroom Googler, because whatever topic we were on, they had so many questions. Like they were just so invested, engaged, and interested. So I would say, okay, we're going to keep reading. And if it's not answered in our reading, we will take some time and look it up and find out those answers. Like, I don't want to squash that desire to learn those teachable moments. Any of those, does that sound familiar?
Yes, we have on our side whiteboard the rabbit hole where we put various topics and questions they want to go down the rabbit hole on. And then we'll do those in our morning meeting and have like a curiosity time where it's like, let's just learn what we are curious about on whatever this topic is.
That's great. If I go back in the classroom, I'm going to have a rabbit hole on the wall, on the board. Lovely.
We used to call it the parking lot, and it's through an Avid kind of program sort of thing, and we broke it down by Katza's levels of questioning too. So like a level 1 question, level 2 question, level 3 question, to get them like a little bit more expanding of that the applicable to other things. It works so much when we get ready for discussions and stuff too.
Very cool. Brent, what would you tell teachers who might be skeptical? Like, we're pretty used to balanced literacy, leveled readers, even in the upper grades. Knowledge building kind of seems a little foreign. Like, how do we make them better readers and writers by building knowledge? How is that going to improve vocabulary and comprehension? What would you say to somebody who was kind of on the fence?
So I've actually done this. We've done some PD and workshops with some of our newer teachers to kind of onboard them into this process. And I have found the most dense, jargon-filled play-by-play recap of a cricket match. And I hand it to the teachers. I have them all read it. And they're very confused. And then I asked them, I was like, well, okay, can you explain the importance of this moment? Or can you just compare and contrast these two things? And they're like, I absolutely can't. I was like, well, if I just give you a little more instruction on how to compare and contrast, are you going to be able to compare and contrast your way into understanding? No. I was like, what would you need to understand this text? Like, well, I need to know about cricket and I need to know what these words are. So as I need that background knowledge and that vocabulary. And then sometimes I'll have that one teacher who's like, I can tell you all about this because I know cricket. And I was like, and there's our culturally responsive teaching as well. Like, it's a culturally biased text. It's not from yours, so you might not have that. So when you build that knowledge, then they can understand what they're reading. Because again, these strategies, a lot of them go back to like first grade. When you read about the mouse pulling the thorn out of the lion's paw, then we talk about theme. These first graders can find the theme if they have the comprehension in place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like, I can keep giving you the skills, but if you can't understand the text that we're reading, or you don't have the knowledge to bring to it, you still can't do all of those. And that's kind of the teacher lens. Switching more to the student lens, Jane, how do you support struggling comprehenders who, while using this approach?
The greatest thing about Amplify is that it's leveled right there for you. You can just with a click move a student who is struggling with a certain unit, or even, all of the units, and move them to get a little more scaffolding in all their lessons. They'll get more sentence stems, they'll get shorter prompts, and it's all right done for you. I used to be able to have a special ed teacher push in, but now, with everything going on, that's rarer and rarer. And so being able to just move a student to a different level where they get more support, that makes my job easier. And it also is, again, a confidence builder for those students, so they feel part of the classroom, that they're not left behind. And it's just much more accessible for them. So I love that about Amplify.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point. When I was using it in my own classroom, my cooperating teacher, we changed. It was no longer like, we'll start class and then you take these students out and do something different if they were even in the classroom that day. We were both just able to stay in and support every student, because every student could be successful with the scaffolding that Amplify provides. And if there are people on the call that aren't familiar, Amplify doesn't level readers, but it does scaffold activities so that students, even students who need a challenge, students who need support, students who are L developing, have activities that are at a level that they can do. What I love is that it's not changing the activity itself. If we're sequencing, we're sequencing. If we're writing an argument, we're writing an argument. But there are supports in there that help students do it at their level and try to get them at the level we want them to be. And the success, I think, that former struggling students felt using Amplify was enormous. To see someone who normally struggles have that success is the best thing in the world.
Yeah, we've had some skepticism of like, well, are these kids really going to be able to read this? And the accommodations don't decrease the text level. Like, they still have to read this hard thing, but it is a real scaffold. It brings them up to the bar with having less text to read and focus on this paragraph instead of all 5. And here's some sentence starters. So it helps them actually approach a complex text rather than lowering the bar. And they rise to that occasion. And I think they thrive on the confidence that we're placing in them, that they can actually read a tough text with help to get there.
Confidence. That's a word I've heard you all say several times, and I think that's so important, particularly today's middle schoolers. That's something that, they really need. They need that dose of confidence. So, wow, I could listen and talk to you all and have these conversations for hours. I've had so much fun hearing about your real experiences, but we are nearing the end of our time. So I would like to check with Tricia and see if there's any questions in the Q&A that we have a little time to answer.
We did have a question come in through the chat earlier, and I suppose this is through an Amplify ELA lens or just generally, but they're wondering if the group has any ideas about effective feedback strategies to help middle school writers.
Oh my God. It's built in. It's perfect. Their classwork tab, you got all the writing right there. You can print it out if you needed to. But they have you can highlight any moment. You can give them a little feedback on that. You can actually even save different types of feedback because there's certain skills that keep popping up. You're like, oh yeah, let's a little bit less quote next time, and you can save that comment and then just copy it. You can just plug it in, and it's quick, it's easy, it's directly to them, notifies them as soon as they get it. And it also includes there's some breakdown of grammar stuff too that gets sent back. It's the feedback is amazing.
I would say don't try to fix everything every time and reframe it. The goal isn't to make this paragraph they wrote perfect and amazing. It's more, this paragraph shows you where they're at. What's like one thing they're currently doing you could fix? So keep it short. Give them one thing to do right now. And then they will do that thing and they can remember that thing. But if you say, here's 18 errors I identified, fix them all, they might fix them that one time, but it's not in a way that it's going to stick later.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I love that we have kind of a rubric focus rather than we're going to look at everything you did in your writing. Let's see if you can do these skills and then give them the feedback and help them grow on those particular skills. Very good points. Anything else as far as a question?
That's it. So it looks like we do have a couple minutes left for final thoughts.
All right. I've loved hearing from all of you. If you have like a final thought on Amplify ELA, its impact on the students, advice to a teacher who's considering it, any of those things, I would love to hear from you.
I'll go first. So I'm a teacher that likes a script, and I've always, taught from a script. And one of the great things about Amplify is that it offers you a script, but you can deviate from that very easily. And it takes you, as you guys both said, down rabbit holes or to parking lots or, whatever, with questions and things. And it really makes a rich classroom. Having taught both the 6th grade curriculum and the 8th grade curriculum, I was actually torn because I loved the 6th grade. When you were talking about it, Brent, all the units that we did, who would think you would really love teaching about chocolate? Or, and then we did that research on yellow fever that was unbelievable. Like, we had some wonderful learning opportunities, and I had people come into the room and their jaws just dropped listening to the students discuss their topics. So then when I moved to 8th grade, I get to the end of the year and I'm like, oh no, I don't have enough days to get all the teaching that I want to get done. I've never, in 22 years, I've never really felt that way, but I try to hurry up because I don't want them to miss anything. It's very exciting to teach with Amplify, I feel. I love the curriculum. I love the rigor and what the kids are exposed to. I feel like we've dumbed down education in a lot of ways by teaching just skills. So to be able to present them with Frankenstein and, Frederick Douglass and all this stuff, it's just fantastic.
Beautifully said. Brent or Brian?
Let's see. I see a comment here in the chat. Is it difficult to teach when you change one or two students' level on Amplify? It's not at all. It'll change what they see. If you're doing the digital version, it'll change what they see. You're still giving everyone the same task, but let's say it's writing a paragraph. Some students will be like, give us 2 to 4 pieces of evidence from these 5 paragraphs that support your claim. And it'll be the same for another student, but it'll be like, give us 1 piece of evidence from paragraph 3, use this sentence starter. So you can teach it to everyone the same way. And then when you're roaming around the room and zoom in, you can just help them individually, and you'll see what is adapted, because it'll be the same text for everyone, the same task. Some kids will just have more supports than others. And it's also great for the students. You coach them and be like, they're like, wait, how come his is a little different? It's like, yeah, it's a little different for everybody. Everybody's got their own thing. Sometimes it's like 4 or 5 different versions that kids are working on. It can get real granular, but it's granular for them, not for you. You're not teaching 6 different things.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I was going to bring up too, is the differentiation. There's 6 different levels of differentiation, including the challenging, and then like learning to read and ELL and all those other things. It's a game changer, and that would be my piece of wisdom or advice, is to use those differentiation, because that's what we should be doing anyways. But I'm only one person, and it thinking of all those different levels and anticipating all that work's been done for you. I have a story of the first year using it. There is a student, he's an 8th grader, and he uh, had a one-on-one like aid. He was very, very low, could not write a complete sentence, did not understand how to write a complete sentence. I put him on that lowest setting, and he had that aide with him. So she was helping him one by one. It helped her teach him a little bit better too. And she's been with him 6th, 7th, 8th grade all the way through. And that's kind of his progress was pretty stagnant. And he'd break down and he'd stress out and he wouldn't be able to like finish anything. When we started using those scaffolding techniques and using the differentiation, he was able to start piecing together complete sentences. And I'm not joking about this. By the end of the year, was he not only writing complete sentences, he was writing complete paragraphs, and he was learning by the end of 8th grade how to write transitions to link the 2 ideas in different paragraphs. He had never grown like that in the 2 years prior to that. And he had a great aid. I probably did something too, but I really think it was the differentiation within Amplify and all those supports that really made a huge, huge difference. I kind of tear up sometimes thinking about the impact that it had on that one student, just within 1 year. It was crazy.
And
That,
I just
Brian,
want
can I
to,
ask? Oh, we all have something to say.
we all want to
I
jump
know
in.
that was the story. Jane and then Brent.
Okay. I was just going to say, when I have put kids on different levels, as we're all discussing, I've often had like that light bulb moment when you put the kid at the appropriate level and they are like, you mean that's all I have to do? And then we can gradually move them back up. But it really is reaching them where they are at this current moment and then bringing them up. So great story, Brian. Good job.
Yeah, and there's I actually wrote a blog post for that on Amplify somewhere. So you want a more detailed version of that story, it's somewhere on Amplify blogs.
And I wanted to ask, Brian, when that happened, did it almost feel like magic? How did this happen when I didn't spend all my time drilling paragraph mechanics?
Yeah, it was, I don't know. It's a relief, a breath of fresh air. I mean, I talked about it the next year at the parent night. Like, hey, this is our program. Look at what it can do, and it's stuck with me all these years later. I don't think it's going to be there ingrained in my brain forever.
Hmm. Well, that
Yeah.
makes my teacher heart happy. I'm sure that we all have, some stories like that, some successes, and it's why we do what we do, right? Brent, did you have something else?
I just say I really appreciate, again, we've talked about the confidence a bit, but I like the confidence it gives me as a teacher from years just kind of throwing together my own thing and my own units because I knew I could do better than the materials I had to work with, but I'm always insecure. It's like, am I doing enough vocab? Am I doing enough grammar? Am I doing enough of this? Am I doing enough nonfiction? And then I got to differentiate and I got to do all that too. And like the first year we started using Amplify, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna step back. I'm just gonna follow the process and trust that they've done all the things. And they really have. Like I now don't have to keep questioning, like, oh, am I doing enough vocab work? Am I doing enough of this? Like it's there and it works. And it's great. And then I get to do what I like doing, which is just dig into like cool stories and texts and like have fun talking about and discussing ideas. And then those skills come out the other side. We know that teaching reading is not like teaching math. It's not a bunch of like discrete stackable processes. So it's nice to have a curriculum that understands that and it doesn't teach like math. It is this organic, holistic process where you dive into the texts and the learning grows.
Hmm. That sounds very familiar to me, Brent. I've often told the story in 25 years of teaching. I went through a lot of curriculum, and my philosophy was always, okay, year one, I will do it your way, and then I will fix it. And I did not fix Amplify. I got better at using it. I realized all the things it could do for my students. But it is truly the most incredible thing that I used in the 25 years. I want to thank you all so much. You've been a wonderful panel. You've had some great stories. I just appreciate you joining us. I appreciate everyone that tuned in. And I'm going to turn it back over to Tricia.
Yes, I did drop Brian's blog post in the chat. I
Did
was
you?
able to track it down in the nick of time, so I popped that there for people to read if they have a second. And I do want to echo Laura's comment. Thank you so much to the wonderful panel, and thank you all so much for joining us. Again, if you'd like to learn more about Amplify ELA beyond what was discussed here, please go ahead and watch our other webinars in the series at amplify.com/fall 2025-SOR-demos. And we appreciate your time here today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.